For God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish but have everlasting life.
Your key to financial opportunity.
I worked graveyard shifts. I was with K9 unit, and I was at home asleep, of course, and I had a scanner next to my bed. Well, I heard the dispatcher, her voice started squeaking real high, and she's one of them veterans that never does that. So I called in. They told me to get out, that they're chasing a suspect that shot one of our sheriff's officers and executed a couple others out of a grain elevator. So I got out, got my dog. I was like maybe 3 blocks from the highway, and then I turned north on 25 and headed out of town. I'd gone maybe 4 or 5 miles when I saw some flashing lights from the highway patrol, and I saw him coming. I was too late to pull in front of the vehicle he was chasing, so I let him go by, and then I got in right behind him. We chased him for about a mile south, and then all of a sudden they turned down what we thought was a country road. Turns out it was a front yard of a house, a farmhouse. And so he slammed on his brake, and I slammed on mine because I almost ran into him. And they had pulled diagonally across in the yard from us, and my windshield disappeared, and then my back window disappeared. Or my side window, I should say. And so I jumped out. He got behind his car, and I was at the fender of mine, and we exchanged fire with him. Then another police unit pulled in and behind him, and they didn't see him. The other police unit. Yeah, they shot the Mark Walters. Wounded Rameta and Lisa Dunn, but Hunter took off running from them. At that time, I'd pulled my dog out. I was going to go after him, and they said, no, we got him. Go check the farmhouse, make sure they didn't get in there, there's nobody home, or nobody was hurt, or whatever. So I took my dog in, and we searched the house and the outbuildings. Nobody there, so that was all of them, all 4 of them. All 4 of them had guns. The KBI and the FBI pretty much took control of the scene by the time we got it all, everything settled down and handcuffed and all this stuff. Pretty much took over the investigation. I'm trying to remember, because as soon as we got secured the scene, we knew everything was all right. We had everybody handcuffed, and we started transporting them. They pulled us to the side and said, start doing your report while it's fresh on your mind. So I sat with the patrolman in his car, and we did our reports. I just remember that when I got my reports done, I went back to the department, and everything they said, hey, we need you to go up to the hospital and guard Rameta, which I thought, well, that's kind of weird. Here I am trying to shoot the guy a while ago. Now there was a lot of reports and rumors and everything else in the town, and everybody was upset, and there was, threats that they were going to come and basically, get them out and kill them or whatever, so we had to keep them under wraps pretty good. He was like, I don't know how to say it, not smug, but just like, oh well, nothing happened, no big deal attitude, He thought, well, I'll be out of here in no time anyway. But he didn't, I probably didn't realize we knew about all the other bodies. She was scared. She was definitely scared. Wasn't mug or nothing. She was, I don't even remember the wording. I just kind of remember she was spouting off. I didn't want to do it. They made me, beat me, and this kind of stuff, you know. Yeah, it was definitely, I mean, it was talking to town for a year or two. I mean, and the thing is, the town, it's a small community college town, 10 to 15,000 people maybe. But everybody knew most of the police, and that's why they were after him, because they got Ben Albright. He was one of them ones that I loved, you know. It was definitely different, you know, for a small town. Well, you had the murders in Garden City, you know, in cold blood. That was national news for a while. Yeah, it was something, and we had I-70 runs right through there, and man, there was always something going on I-70. People come through there, it's desolate. They think that, you know, they can get by with anything, and I mean, we were always pulling somebody off interstate, somebody wanted for something. They were fighting that. We got a new governor, and he tried to get rid of her, got rid of it, if I remember right at the time. And that's one of the reasons they decided to send Rameta to Florida. Wanted to go there anyway, because they have the death penalty there. Yeah, he was asking for it. He wanted to change his mind after a while, but at the time, that's what he was wanting. Yeah, there was a big fight over that for a while, and I think, from what I remember, they temporarily reinstated it for, I don't remember, it's been like 38 years ago, I can't remember, they got special permission or special whatever, heinous of the crime. I remember when they told me he got out, and then I remember it was shortly, maybe days afterwards, he had a heart attack. I said, well, good, justice served. Kind of laughed at that, you know. It's like, good. Yeah, he always claimed from the beginning he was a hitchhiker. Hey, they made me do it. They were going to kill me, and you know, this kind of stuff. But from witnesses we got, you know, for somebody that was being made do something, he was sure getting into it. Yeah, there was things that went around, and supposedly Rameta was going to try to shoot him at one time, and he took his gun away from him. He didn't give his gun back, Walter's gun back to him, until we stopped him. And they might have picked him up, but he wasn't, he wasn't backing down and not going to do anything, if you know what I mean. He was a participant, no matter how he got there. He was a participant. Faces after the first ones they killed way back when they picked him up. He could have ran off then or whatever, you know. He could have got away if he'd wanted to. They trusted him with a gun. I mean, we don't know any more than you do. It's always been Rameta did it. All the other ones had Rameta did it. So, you know, we have no proof otherwise. I mean, I'm somewhere along the line, ballistics had to been done, so they would at least know maybe whose gun it was. I mean, you know, somewhere along the line. You really, I mean, depends on how they did it, but if you got two people laying side by side, you're talking about a matter of a second to the other one. We had heard it. I mean, it could have been. I don't remember where we heard it or something, but we had heard one time that Lisa did one of them. But that was police talk. I mean, that was just, you know, there was never any proof of it. The ones involved were me and in the Highway Patrol, Mark Convoy, and James Dybel and Dennis Brown. We were the first ones on the scene. Steve Harvey, well, he went with me into the house to do the building search. I was thinking all the stuff that went on, I don't even know who lived there. We never even heard, like, hey, they called and thanked us, or hey, they called and wanted to know what was going on. Never heard a word. You know, be down at the police station, hey, what the heck is going on? Yeah, that's kind of weird. I've thought of that before. It's like, you know what, I don't even know who lives there, never heard anything about him. Well, it was definitely a day, that's for sure.
Well, pretty much all of the main guys, the law enforcement that I was involved with, the sheriff's gone, both the Dybel and Brown are gone, Ben Albright's gone. my dad worked for the government, so we moved around a lot. And I was born at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, but then he went back home to Minneapolis, Minnesota, and we went from there to Columbus, Ohio, and to Indianapolis and Miami and Bangkok, Thailand. I went to high school in Atlanta, Georgia. Graduated from high school in a suburb of Kansas City called Overland Park. Then my family moved back to the D.C. area. I joined the Army, was in Korea, and then was stationed at Fort Riley. And when I got out of the Army, I stayed in Kansas. I applied and was accepted to the Kansas Highway Patrol, and that was back in 1978. When it started going down, the manager at the Stuckey's had got shot and killed. When that got put out, of course, everybody and their brother in northwest Kansas was looking for him. I mean, all the troopers, all the sheriffs, all the police departments, everybody was looking for him. So I was never actually assigned. Actually, I kind of came up behind it and wasn't really involved. And then just all of a sudden, there they were. I don't know, I'm guessing 45 minutes before I was a long ways away. I was probably, from where I ended up, probably 50 miles. The initial, you had Stuckey's, and then later on, the sheriff's deputy, Ben Albright, stopped them. That was probably, half hour later, 20 minutes later. And then the van incident, and then we started hearing about that. And so, I mean, everybody was just, running around all over the country looking for them. But and this becomes an issue in Florida, but at the shootout, there were two guns. Mark Walter had one, and James Hunter had one. Danny Rameta did not have a gun. But, he claimed, and if you go all the way through the story, Danny Rameta was basically the tough guy that claimed that he was the mastermind of everything. And later, when he was getting ready to be put to death, he claimed that Lisa Dunn was the mastermind and, he was doing what she wanted. And I tend to believe more of that, to be honest with you. Rameta, Lisa Dunn probably had twice the IQ that Danny Rameta had. He was some old bum that had been in prison for, most of the last 10 years, quite a bit older than her, probably 10 years. I think he did much of what he did to impress her, yes. I mean, I was, the shootout happened, everybody was arrested and pretty much hauled off. I handcuffed Lisa. She was kind of laughing. She said, she had made the comment to somebody, and I don't remember who now, but that basically she didn't know that brains would scatter that far, referring to Mark Walter's brains on the side of the pickup. She did, make the statement several times to Danny that she loved him, and she made the statement to us several times that, that we'd shot the wrong guy. They pulled into Stuckey's. Well, prior to that, there was the three of them. There was Mark Walters, there was Danny Rameta, and Lisa Dunn. When they came into Kansas, it was just the three of them. And they came from the south. They went through Wichita on I-135. There they picked up James Hunter, as a hitchhiker. They got up, apparently went up through Salina, turned west on I-70. When they got to the little town called Grainfield, Kansas, there was a Stuckey's there. And it's pretty close to a pretty large high school, kind of a regional high school there called Wheatland High School. And they went in and they robbed, the manager was in there by himself. His name was Larry McFarland. And they shot him, trying to remember how many times he got shot, several times, and killed him for $170. A student at the school, like I said, it was close to this high school. So there was a student apparently that had stopped over there to get a snack. It was the student that found the body, and the student had seen a red and blue car with Michigan tags leaving as they pulled in. So they reported that. So we were looking for a red and blue car with Michigan tags, which obviously kind of stood out. Ben Albright, the deputy, he stopped the car up west of Colby on I-70, and that's when he got shot. He claimed that James Hunter got out on the passenger side and shot him. Rameta took credit for it later and claimed to have done everything. After that, they apparently decided that they needed to change vehicles, so they were close to the small town called Levant, and I don't know what the population is now. I think back then it was like 60 or 70, something like that, 68, something like that. They pulled into a grain elevator. In that grain elevator, there were several people in there. One of them was inside, was the manager. There was two guys that were outside. There was a guy by the name of Rick Schroeder that was 29 years old and a 55-year-old man named Glenn Moore. They forced them into the back of the pickup and took them as hostage. Before they left, they broke the window in the office there of the grain elevator and shot the manager. And his name was Morris Christie, shot him in the back, and they left him for dead, but he ended up living. As they were leaving, and I don't know why they took these hostages, because shortly thereafter they stopped on a road, and they made them lay face down in the road, and they executed both in the back of the head and left them dead. Now they were driving it was a two-tone green club cab pickup that was owned by Moore. They headed north on 25 highway out of Colby up towards a city called Atwood in the next county. And apparently prior to getting to Atwood, they saw or became aware of a roadblock that the police and probably the sheriff up there had set up. And so they turned around and headed back south. And that's when I ran into them. Yeah, I was headed north on 25. I met two semis, and they were tucked in behind the second semi. So it was just like all of a sudden, boom, there they were. Small two-lane country road, basically. I was the first, but not very. They're very close behind me was a marked Colby police car, and I didn't know who that was, but there was one there. And then back behind them, and I didn't have a clue who these people were. And you got to understand, back then, we were kind of all on different frequencies, and communications wasn't what it is now. There was a station wagon back there, just a privately owned station wagon back behind all of us. And like I said, I had no clue that they were there, but it turned out, thank God, it was the two half brothers from Colby PD in a personal vehicle, and that was Dennis Brown and Ken Dybel. I turned around. They passed the two semis. I got around the two semis. We came up on a farmhouse. The farmhouse had two driveways. The north driveway went off to like a big farm building, big metal building where they stored the tractors and stuff, outbuilding. And then the south driveway went up to the house, and they got off on that first driveway and started heading at an angle towards the house. And I didn't follow them. Thank God I didn't follow them. I just gunned it, and I got ahead of them on the blacktop and went to the driveway at the house, and I beat them there. And, just to keep them out of the house. I was worried about them getting in that house because, of course, obviously could be people in there. As it turns out, there weren't. But, a house in western Kansas, a farmhouse, has probably got guns in it too. We'd have had a standoff, for sure, had they got in there. And anyway, I managed to get ahead of them. I pulled into that driveway, and so they stopped. I stopped. Just as I was getting out of my car, Mark Walter got out of the truck on the driver's side, and they were at an angle to me, facing straight towards them. But I was looking at the side of their truck on the driver's side. So Mark got out. I'm looking right at him. First thing he does is turn, and he fires a shot at me. It hits my windshield just as I'm getting out of the car. And then, so I ran around to the rear corner of my car. The marked Colby police car stopped right behind me. The station wagon, which was Dennis Brown and Ken Dybel, they stopped at the first driveway back. Well, the other three got out on the passenger side. J.C. Hunter went to run back around that building. And again, there's only two guns there. Mark Walter has one, and he shot at me, and J.C. Hunter has the other gun, and he's running back around behind the building. he got back to the right rear corner and he fell in the snow, and you could see there were handprints back there where it looked like he was trying to find the gun. The gun had kind of skipped underneath the snow. Anyway, of course, Mark Walder is focused on me and the other marked car behind me, and he's shooting at us, and he's not paying any attention to this station wagon that's up at the end of the other driveway either. And I don't have a target, basically. I mean, my target is shadows underneath this truck, and I'm just firing shots in there trying to keep them pinned down, keep them out of that house. I ended up firing 12 shots, back in the day when we had revolvers that held 6 and, dump pouches. So I had to reload twice, reloaded twice. I mean, shot 12, but I ended up with a full gun. That time, Kenneth Dybel, while Mark Walters was shooting at us, they yelled at him. They yelled something at him. When he heard them, he turned towards them, and when he did, Dybel hit him right in the forehead with a rifle shot. They started yelling ceasefire, and at that point we went up, and of course Mark Walter was dead. Well, just prior to that, they went to the side of the metal building, the north side of that metal building, and they were yelling at J.C. Hunter to get down. So they took him into custody on the side of the building over there. Danny Rameta, and I've said this before, but he didn't put up any resistance at all. He was basically, in just my opinion, but my impression was he was kind of the tough guy, the bully that's real tough when, he has control of things, but when it got tough, all of a sudden he was a real wimp. He just laid there. That's where my involvement pretty much ended. I was from another county. I mean, I was totally out of my area. I just headed up that way when everything was going on. And so I went back down. I was from Oakley, and I went up ended up going down to Colby PD, making a statement, filling out a statement, and then I went home. So I didn't really have any involvement in the aftermath as far as the investigation. And you've got jurisdictional issues there too, because eventually the KBI, the Kansas Bureau of Investigation, came in and took over. But I mean, we were actually in Rawlins County, and not in Colby is in Thomas County, and Levant is in Thomas County. The Stuckey's is in Gove County. So we're dealing with several counties here. Most of the evidence handling was done by, I think, the Thomas County Sheriff's Office, but very typical in the smaller counties, on a major case, because I mean that's kind of what they're there for, is to come in and help on, a little 5-man department doesn't have the resources and the training and the experience to handle, the larger cases. I mean, that's what KBI is for. Heard the next day on the news, the next morning, all that information started coming in the next morning. I mean, I went home and wasn't involved with much of the investigation, so what they knew that night, I don't know. But I mean, did we know? Were we actively looking for those people? No, we weren't. Know that anybody had a description until that student at Stuckey's. I don't know that anybody ever had a description of the car, but no, we didn't know anything about her. I didn't, anyway. Of course, things weren't. Communication wasn't what it is now. Well, Daniel Rameta didn't really have a trial in Kansas. He pled guilty to the charges in Kansas. Basically, he was doing his tough guy thing, and he claimed that he didn't want to die in prison, that he wanted to be put to death, so he wanted to go to one of the states that had the death penalty. So he pled guilty in Kansas, and was sent back to Florida for trial. And he went to Ocala, Florida. And then me and Brown and Dybel were all sent to Florida to testify on his behalf. Once he got there, now all of a sudden he's got his attorney's defense was that at the shootout, and he claimed that he had done everything, but his defense attorney's defense was, well, hey, at the shootout he didn't have a gun. So we went to Ocala, Florida, that on his behalf that he didn't have a gun at the shootout. There's people in Kansas that placed guns in his hand, particularly at Levant. I mean, there was witnesses up there that saw him shoot Morris Christie and that saw, who was where when they drove off, and that Mark Walters was in fact driving. She was very stoic, and she claimed they originally were tried together in Colby. Hunter and Dunn were tried together. And they were both found guilty. They both claimed innocent. He claimed, hey, I was just an innocent hitchhiker. She claimed that she was abused and couldn't get away. And so basically neither of them were guilty of anything, but they were found guilty. Then later on, different deals, they were both given new trials. J.C. Hunter's trial was first, and it was in Hayes, which was like 100 miles away, 100 miles east. In his trial, again, was Rameta claimed that he had done everything, and Hunter, hadn't done anything, and he was just an innocent hitchhiker. And what it boiled down to is they just apparently didn't believe, Ben Albright that he knew who shot him, and they found him not guilty, and he was released. And then 4 days after he was released, he's back in the Kansas City area somewhere. And I remember how old he was, like 38, something like that. He dies of a heart attack 4 days after he gets out of prison. I don't for a minute believe that he was innocent. I mean, I don't believe he knew what he was getting into, no. There's no evidence that they knew each other in advance or he knew what he was getting into. But to start with, he claimed when he was hitchhiking he was headed to Kansas City. But to go north, if you look at a map, he should have been on the turnpike and not on 135. And so to go north on 135 to Salina is out of the way. It doesn't make any sense. Did he have chances to get away? Did he, like I said, the only thing that I know is that, number one, as a friend of Ben's, Ben had been on the Oakley Police Department prior to going to the Thomas County Sheriff's Office. And he, I know in my own mind that Ben knew who shot at him, or who shot him. I know in my mind, I see it still to this day, 40 years later, see a clear picture of Mark Walters shooting at me. There's just some things you don't get out of your brain. And I know, but anyway, the jury didn't buy him. Basically, it was that Ben's a nice guy, but he didn't know who shot at him, and they found him not guilty. At the same time, up at the shootout, there's two guns, and Hunter has one of them. Why is that? Why doesn't he just put the gun down and give up? Why is he running around the building, and then coming back to flank us? It just doesn't make sense. He was a good guy and he was innocent, then we should have been perceived as the good guys to him and not the enemy, but that's not what he saw. And then of course Lisa, and I don't remember the dates, but she ended up, a federal court overturned her conviction, and they gave her a new trial in Topeka, which was literally 300 miles away. So several years later, all these people from Colby got to go 300 miles. She was eventually acquitted on what they called the battered woman defense. And they kept her in jail. She was still in jail because Arkansas wanted her on the charges there. But then later, they made it some kind of plea agreement. She pled to a lesser charge of hindering apprehension, whatever that means. She was sentenced to 20 years, but they suspended her sentence for time served in Kansas and let her go. Well, and this is just personal opinion, but I thought she was the instigator of most of this. I think Danny did what he did to impress the young girl. I don't see it as being the other way around. I think she was the brains behind this. She was certainly not innocent, cold and callous. And then later, I don't know how much you know about her afterlife, but and I don't know all the details, but she had several jobs. She ends up getting arrested for she was working for I'm trying to remember. She was working for like a psychologist office or something, and she ended up stealing $8,000 from her employer, and so she had several legal problems later on in life. Well, you can't reinstate it after the fact, but the issue at the time was John Carlin did not want to release these people to states that had the death penalty. That's what the uproar was. he didn't want to release Lisa to Arkansas to possibly be put to death. He didn't want to release Danny to Florida. There was some kind of agreement with Florida when he released them to Florida. Florida said, we won't try, we won't push for the death penalty. And then they did anyway. So that may be the uproar that you're thinking about, because governor was not happy about that. Florida kind of deceived him, apparently. Well, yeah, because they can't reinstate the death penalty after the crime's committed. You can you can, but you couldn't apply it to them. Really wasn't around him much. Came in and testified and left. So, and of course he's sitting there, in a controlled environment and, just sitting there basically. Before he was put to death, his whole tune changed dramatically. He went from, I want to die, I'm the tough guy, I did it all, to she was in charge, and not wanting to die. He did everything he could at the very end to keep from getting put to death. He totally changed his tune. He wasn't quite the tough guy at the end that he was in Kansas. And that's kind of where I get my description of him as a bully. I would say it's, kind of indicative of the typical bully. They're a tough guy when they've got the upper hand, but as soon as they don't, they're, don't hurt me, don't hurt me. It's a typical thing, though. You have everything, passing through there. You've got drugs, you've got stolen cars, you've got guns, you've got, whatever you can imagine is coming across I-70. And, not just I-70, but any of the major interstates. But that's pretty much what the troopers do for the most part, at least. It's different in different states, but, you just never know what you're going to run into, because basically criminals commit traffic violations. So, troopers as a whole, you make a lot of felony arrests, stopping people for speeding and for, traffic infractions. And then, you get them stopped and you find out, they've got a warrant from out of Chicago, or they've got whatever. It's a stolen car, or they have drugs, or they have whatever. Yes. It's not an uncommon thing. It's not every day by any means, but yeah, it's not uncommon at all. Well, I was involved many years later in a flood type situation where part of the interstate here flooded out and it washed some people off down into a ravine, and took, there was a mother and 3 kids that took 3 days to float to the surface. So, it was not a shooting type situation, but it was, very traumatic. Just that it was a very traumatic day for Western Kansas. There were a lot of people out there, like this little town that, in Levant was 68 people, and all of a sudden you've shot one and killed 2 more, and, you've shot a deputy, and then the little town of Greenfield where, working people that didn't deserve this, and it changed their whole lives that day. Yeah, I still get, I've had people, years later go, oh yeah, I remember that day. I was in 3rd grade and they put us on lockdown. Well, again, I was an outsider, and even as an, and I told you the cities that I lived in, Atlanta and Miami and DC, and then I get stationed in Oakland, Kansas, and I never really totally fit in out there, but, everybody was related to everybody, and everybody knew everybody, and, that kind of thing. So, this had you just could not have not known someone that was involved with this. And I, of course, I was friends with Ben, and, I didn't know any of the other victims really, but it was just really, really traumatic.
Death rides the highway.
Think, feel, and understand the world around you with Spoon River Gothic Podcast, because we go where the others don't. We dive deeper. And if you want to plunge even deeper into our true crime tales, please subscribe to Spoon River Gothic Agency. That's SRG Agency at www.patreon.com/Spoon River Gothic Podcast, and access the Spoon River Gothic Podcast case file for bonus weekly episodes available on Spotify. And also included in the Patreon case file are investigative materials such as exclusive audio interviews, trial footage, police files, court documents, photos, diagrams, and more to accompany each Season 2 episode of Death Rides the Highway. And if you like what you hear, please leave us a 5-star review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen. It means more than you know in this cutthroat world. And until next time, work hard, party hard, keep a vigilant eye over your shoulder, and don't forget to watch each other's backs. This is a sideways world we are living in. And again, that's www.patreon.com/Spoon River Gothic Podcast. Subscribe now, because there's always more to the story.
Ever wonder how much of your personal data is out there on the internet for anyone to see? More than you think. Your name, contact info, social security number, home address, and even information about your family members is all being compiled by data brokers and sold to the highest bidders online. That means anyone on the web, criminal or investigator, can get your private details, which, as true crime enthusiasts know all too well, increases your risk of identity theft, phishing scams, harassment, stalking, and unwanted phone calls. As a podcast that exists publicly and shares our opinions online, we are hyper aware of safety and security, and all this data being so easily searchable on the internet can have real-life consequences. This is why Spoon River Gothic is proud to partner with Delete Me, the #1 service in online data removal. Delete Me finds and removes any information you don't want online and makes sure it stays off. Their dedicated team finds and removes your personal info from the largest people search databases and helps prevent potential ID theft, doxing, stalking, and phishing scams in the process. That's why I personally recommend Delete Me for protecting yourself and your personal information. Sign up at joindeleteme.com/spoonriver and provide Delete Me with exactly what information you want deleted, and their experts will take it from there. As part of their subscription service, you will even receive personalized privacy reports showing what they found, where they found it, and what they removed. Delete Me isn't just a one-time service. Their experts are always working for you, constantly monitoring and removing the personal information you don't want accessible online. To put it simply, Delete Me does all the hard work of wiping you and your family's personal info off the web and making your personal profile no longer anyone's to sell. So join us at deleteme.com/spoonriver, because no one wants to be a victim nor a suspect. So get protected, and the next time a case hits too close to home, you won't find yourself asking the stranger on the other end of the phone, "How did you get my number?" Go to joindeleteme.com/spoonriver and get started today.
Death rides the highway.